gotta clean my glasses. Yeah, we're got my glasses back on. Yeah, we're live. It's just 7:04, so we're a couple of minutes late. So cheers to everybody out there. It's the weekend, and that means for me watching my son play soccer, which is awesome. I like getting out and getting out in the sun, getting out in the real world, finding stuff out, and watching them play is kind of an awesome deal. But the question for tonight, and this will be the poll also, we'll go ahead and we'll put that up as soon as a few more people get here. The question for tonight and the poll is the Skyram real? Did they really make a Skyram? Is it a real thing? Or so we'll do cheers to the Skyram, which is awesome. If you guys had been following the this channel for a long time, you should remember some similar kinds of manifolds that I this is probably where they got the idea, but and so shout out to the guys at Holley. I totally stole your photo, so if you see that up there, that's me. I just snatched it off the internet. But if you've taken a look at some of the videos that I posted and some of the discussions for the live feed, you've seen some of the manifolds that we've done, because I've done adjustable ones where we've just basically extended stuff up. I've never gone to the sky level. I've only gone to the mezzanine level. I think the longest one I tested was probably 20 inches or maybe 22 inches. And that worked out, fairly well, as you would expect. So my question for now, before we get to the poll, is would you guys like to see more of these like ultra long runner things? Because I've wanted to for a long time, and I need a 440 to test it on back when I had borrowed Freiburgers. But I want to run the Sonic Ram or whatever, the early, really ultra long runner one. I've only seen one in person. The guys at West Tech had one, and I want to run one of those. And I might even do it as an EFI one, but we all might also do it as a carbureted one. The original ones are hard to come by and they're very expensive. So honestly, I could make one for like less than half the price of what it would cost to make one, to get one. And I could make it so that we can make it really long. Not that 3 feet or whatever it is already isn't long enough, and we can also shorten it to kind of see what's going on, and we can see what's happening with the waves. And that's why I made the other ones that I made. I made stuff for the LS. I made it for the various modular Fords, the 2-valve, the 3-valve, and the 4-valve. We even ran it on the 4.8 or 4.6 and 5.4 on the modular family. I made one for the Honda. Made one originally. The first one I did was actually for a 5-liter Mustang application. And so making it, when you make it out of tubing, like they showed with the Skyram, you just extend it up as far as you want. I mean, with me, the way that I did it so that I could check different lengths was I made the easiest way is just to make slip fit tubings. I mean, you could get really fancy and weld on like flanges with O-rings and, do all that. But that's not the way that I roll. The time on the dyno is precious and expensive. So you want to make sure that the thing that you're testing, that you've already got your ducks in a row and you can make that work. So doing slip fit tubing is really easy. And then you just, for me, okay, let's change it 4 inches. Let's change it another 4 inches, another 4 inches, 6, 8 inches, 8 inches, whatever it is. Let's change that and then see where, first of all, let's see what big changes do. So where does this thing want to be? And then you can do smaller changes. Okay, you can, when I did, a lot of times when I did adjustable runners, I would do like a set of 8 inches runners, a set of 6s, a set of 4s, and a set of 2s. And then we could combine basically all those to get kind of almost whatever we want, anywhere in between. So that made testing quick and easy. And then we would obviously test fit all of that stuff to see if the changes that we were making, for instance, when we raise it up, unless the throttle linkage raises up with that, you have an issue with throttle linkage. So you got to make sure that you're thinking about all of that stuff. And then also a lot of times on the slip fit tubing, it's a slip fit tube because I'm just taking it over to the muffler shop and having swedge it open and then go, hey, it needs to slide into here. And then the amount that you're swedging has to be adjusted into the runner length. And then also what we would do a lot of times is I would either just use the black Gorilla tape and seal it up. Honestly, for wide open throttle, like I didn't care that it had a vacuum leak when we were running it at part throttle. The idle was high or whatever. I don't care about that. So when you go to wide open throttle, there's no longer a vacuum leak. It's not really nearly as much of an issue. So it's not leaking past there. But we could seal that if we wanted, like I said, Gorilla tape, or I even had, depending on what size the diameter of the tubing that I'm using for the particular application that I'm using it on, 1 3/4 inch, 2 inch, 2 1/4 was usually somewhere in that range. I also had some rubber couplers that had 2 clamps on them, so you could slide the fittings into the tubing into the rubber couplers, and they would join up together. You could even slide the coupler over the fitting for the swedge tubing, and then you had 2 clamps, one on each side, and then it wouldn't leak. And that actually added some structure to it too. But again, since we were just testing rudder length, none of that was an issue, and none of this was ever going to be none of it was ever going to be run like in a vehicle. On the Skyram, all their thing looks like it's one piece. So we'll get going on our poll here so that it'll be up for the whole time. So the question is, for the poll, is the Skyram a real intake? That one says Shyram. That's a different one. That's one that you can't see, that has no runner length at all. It doesn't want to come out of its shell. Is the Skyram a real intake? So meaning that, does it actually exist? Is it just a photoshopped piece? I know that they have they have that Skyram photoshopped onto a bunch of vehicles, even the whatever the moon buggy is called. They've even photoshopped it on there, and then I don't know if they photoshopped, but they also stacked up all of those nitrous plates on it, which is, for an April Fool's thing, they did an excellent job. So my hat's off to the guys at Holley. You guys did an awesome job. But let's see what you guys think. Is the Skyram real? I mean, we want it to be real, right? We want it to be like, we want a 6-foot runner length or whatever that is, that's going to make peak power at 800 RPM, or wherever it's going to be tuned to make power at. So I don't know, when people are voting in the poll, is it that they want it to be real, or do they actually think that it's real? So I honestly, it's a weekend. I don't even care. Either way works good with me. It would actually be fairly easy to build. In fact, I already have most of the stuff. I already have the because I've already made an adjustable manifold. I've already made an adjustable manifold that has that angle that basically goes straight up. And the reason that I do that is because when you're doing slip fit tubes, you know, because this goes back years when I was doing this, have been doing this stuff at West Tech. When you rather than have a bunch of weird bends in it so that it fits stuff, is that if you make the initial bend and have them go straight up, then all you're doing is replacing straight sections of tubing. And then they can just be, like I said, one side is swedge and one side is not. It just goes on, just stacks together, and you could keep stacking them up and essentially until you run out of room on the dyno, until you run out of like ceiling clearance on the dyno. I don't know what that number is, but it's up there pretty good. The other thing that makes it, well, you would have to put the intake manifold after you put the motor on the dyno too, because trying to wiggle the motor on the dyno with that thing, with it being that close to the ceiling, would become problematic. So you'd get the motor in place and then hopefully put the intake manifold on. So what we let's see where we are going so far on the. Got 52 votes. Is the Skyram real? Only 48%. Oh, 51. We've got a big jump. 51% saying yes and 49% saying no. So right now it's split fairly evenly on whether or not it's no. And the question isn't whether or not this is a production piece. The question is it real? Like, does it exist? Did they make this, actually fabricate this manifold as a one-off? You know, it's definitely a one-off April Fool's kind of thing. That it's not something you would ever offer for anything, because it wouldn't be effective. It's way too long. It's going to make peak torque way too low for most any kind of application, other than maybe an agricultural generator motor or something, because it's way too long. But that, even though it would be essentially useless, that doesn't make it not cool. In fact, I think it could be argued that it makes it even more cool. And obviously they caused quite a stir, on the internet. Not like Kim Kardashian break the internet kind of thing, but they did obviously got a lot of traction with this thing, which is kind of awesome. And people want to see stuff like that. And so my question is, do you guys want to see this kind of testing? I have done extreme stuff. I've even done cross ram stuff, which worked very well too. Once you get the tubing past each other, which depending on how the port spacing is, once you get those passed, again, you can just use straight sections. It doesn't arc over and look as pretty. It's not Steve Morris pretty or or Nelson pretty or Tom Nelson pretty, but it is effective and it works. So if you just start stacking those on there, and then the other thing that I did is these are almost all dual plenum designs. I think that they went up and had a singular deal like they do with the higher amps and stuff, which is effective for them, and it's, you know, it fits with the other things that are in that family. But what I did was, whether I was doing a cross ram, whether I was going straight up, I had dual plenums, and then we had on the dual plenums, it was already built, so it would go and receive whatever length tubing I had, because it itself was swedged and then had a radius entry inside the plenum in each one of the individual plenums, and it would just slide on to the tubing. And it facilitated making testing like very, very easy. So I could just put those on there. And then I also tried on a number of combinations, more so on the 2-valve 4.6 motor when I was testing that, because I ran the same dual plenums on the 2-valve and the 3-valve and the 4-valve, because the bore spacing is the same on all those blocks, and on the 5.4 as well. So I just had to make different lower intake manifolds and then stack those up, and then I could use those dual plenums and they would just go right on, and it all worked out pretty cool. And it liked having dual plenums. It also liked having connections between the dual plenums, because on the back of the dual plenums, I put throttle body outlets, let's say, and then connected those with a 90-degree elbow. And then depending on how far apart they were, I could put different sections of tubing in the middle in that crossover tube. We also tried crossover tubes in the center of the plenums. I don't think I tried them at the front of the plenums on the 2-valve. I don't think I did that, but we did try individual inlet tubes in front of the throttle bodies and then radius entries on those tubes, and that had an effect on the individual plenum stuff. Interestingly enough, I did that same test recently on an LS V8 with a common, this was with a truck or a Trailblazer SS intake manifold, and I wanted to see what effect different intake tubing length has, because it affects the Helmholtz resonance. And it showed all I could do was effectively lose power compared to having an open throttle body. And the tubes even had a radius entry on the tube. But I tried a variety of different lengths, and I also tried 3.5-inch and 4-inch different diameters, straight ones, curved ones, long ones, short ones. And like I said, it didn't ever seem to like have any appreciable effect on any part of the curve, because I was looking for kind of low speed power to see if I could enhance that with the induction size, which I've seen before, primarily on 4 cylinders. But I was hoping for good things on this V8 too, and it just was like, I don't really care about it. So the let's see our poll. We got 129 votes 6 minutes ago. Still split pretty good. 54% saying that it is real, and 46% saying that it's not. The marketing guys over there, Mark and Evan and those guys, they did a really good job. That thing's super cool. I remember Brule telling me about this, and I thought, that's really cool that they're doing it, that it's that high. I said, that's obviously to the extreme level, but still, again, super cool. Big thumbs up. Let's see. So I just now, my phone sent a message. I sent a text over to Freiberger. I said, "Is this thing real? Does it exist? And are you guys going to be testing it for Engine Masters?" And so we will, by the end of the video, have that answer, which I'm not going to tell you right now. Wait. There was a little bit left. Good stuff. And if you guys haven't seen, maybe check out Freiberger's deal. They're driving across country in a World War II Jeep. So that's, shout out to David Freiberger, because that's kind of awesome. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, I was just telling David that I've run adjustable intakes like that, but nothing that long. So it will be interesting. Hopefully Brule can load that motor down, whatever motor they're testing it on. And if it's real, they can load it down low enough that they can show what a runner, if it's even possible, that they could show what that kind of thing would do, like that Sonic Ram deal. All of that would be cool. I'm hoping that if that thing is like, if it's the real deal, that somebody could test it. I don't know that they would. I obviously I got pinged left and right on that when that thing showed up on April Fool's Day. Everyone, I got lots of things that said, "Hey, you need to get this to Richard. You need to test it." Blah 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 blah. And I was like, okay, yeah, that would all be fun and that would be cool, but I don't know if it's real because they've done this before with the, I don't know, umpteen like nitrous plates that they were doing. Hey, you're going to run a 3,000 shot or something like that, and everyone's like, you need to test this. You definitely need to try this. Let's see. Cross country on a Ford Jeep. No, the cross country on a World War II Jeep, like a real one. They started out with a broken motor and then put another motor in. I mean, it's an adventure. It's definitely kind of cool. And you're right, Val. Everything on YouTube is real. Skyram for underwater driving. That's it. That's the snorkel up. Snorkel up, I guess. Yeah. Goats and toes. Helmholtz calculation says 71 degrees to get resonance at 2,000 RPM. That's great, except this is not, that runner length is not about Helmholtz resonance. It's about reflected wave. So recalculate. As long as it peaks at cranking RPM and stalls out by idle. Tyler, I was looking right at it. It's got to be real. See, that's what we want to hear. We want to hear people that are like behind the scenes. Flat fender Jeep life, yeah, they're and they've run into weather and broken stuff, all kinds of problems. Ford produced a number of Jeeps for World War II. Oh, okay. Hope they're wearing kidney belts. Yeah, it would be a bit of a it would be a bit of a trip, something like that. Because that, what do you think that the top speed is on a World War II Jeep? Can you even take that on the freeway? Because I think that they're taking back roads and off roads and stuff. Which again, that's a total shout out for that kind of stuff. That's like supremely awesome. Looked like it was a 3D printed, so why couldn't it be real? Whether it can be run or not is a different story. New Iron Duke testing was out today. I did see that. It makes me want to do an Iron Duke. Skyrim needs a big blower on top. The Chrysler runs on the B engine were 30 inches. I thought that they were about 3 feet, so I wasn't off too far on my estimate. Skyrim is Holley's April Fool's joke. Put the jokes on them. Rich will make one and test it. Let's see where we are on our. This is obviously the poll is official, super official. So it's going to decide whether this is real or not. So is the Skyrim a real intake? Is it a real functioning intake, or is it just a Photoshop thing? So we're almost split. We got 49% saying yes and 51% saying no. So the poll's going, got 197 votes there. I like that. They did the tubes all wrong. They need to be tapered. We've learned since the Chrysler days. Why do they need to be tapered? It works really well if they're not tapered. Richard, you should show the pictures of it. I tried to find a different picture that I could screenshot, but all of them were like long ways, so I couldn't get a good shot that I could make work. Would the Skyrim with a blower on top give you enough boost lag to prevent wheel slip and a hard launch? No, if anything, it would be better, because if you had a blower on top of it, assuming that those tubes would stand up to the weight and stuff, that they would be okay with that. Maybe if you ratchet strap them all together. The long runner is going to definitely enhance low speed torque, and the blower would also enhance that. The GR86 is much cooler than the Corolla. There's no way that that's real. That Tyler, you're right. That would be a long belt. Even and I've shown this before, especially on the live feeds when I've been down at West Tech. When you look at Freiberger's motor that has the 871 on it with a tunnel ram on it, it's a lot of belt. We don't even need JB Weld and Home Depot, Kevin. We can just make it out of aluminum tubing. I probably have enough stuff to stack together. I don't know if I can get all the way up there with 8 of them, but aluminum tubing is easy to get, especially if you go in and say, look, I need 8 6-foot sections, and then that will be the majority of the manifold. The organ pipe, that's where all of this stuff comes from. That's where all of the reflected wave and Helmholtz resonance, all organ pipe theory. Quick spool intake for a turbo, making a 3D CAD model of the Skyrim will only take a few mouse clicks starting with the high ram model. That would be cool. Speaking of blower superchargers, did you sell the LS671 intake? I did. If you did a blower on top of that, you could use several staggered pulleys and belts. That would be cool. You could do a belt to a belt to a belt and have it jump up there. The YouTube guy that tests a bunch of the 4 cylinders already tested the super long runners. I've done that also on IR stuff. And I'm going to do that on the 2.2 motor as well. A video testing on how much power could be made with an LS or any engine if packaging and size limitations were not a factor. I don't understand what you're asking there. I've done the Big Bang motor, and that's a stock bottom end. If you're talking about a dedicated build motor, the packaging really isn't a concern. I mean, if you look at a top fuel motor, that's a pretty good example. It doesn't have any packaging constraints really. They're a little bit concerned with aerodynamics and airflow into the motor, but that gives you a fairly good idea. That's 10,000 or more horsepower. Which intake would you pick for an LS6, fast or Holley Sniper? A fast will make more power than a Holley Sniper up to 6,500 RPM. So depending on where you are concerned with power production. When is the vintage VW flat 4 stuff coming? I've only ever been over at another shop where they've run those on the engine dyno. Will the high ram fit on a 363 Ford 302 base? Yeah, because it's just the Ford and the LS are the same motor, right? So it should just bolt right on. Did the Skyrim have a plenum? Yeah, it does. It has a setup like the low ram or the high ram. Yeah, the Skyram is not an IR manifold. It's a common plenum. Yeah, I saw the 4AG testing, and he did connecting rod length changes too, and nah. And I'm a really big fan of those motors. The guys at West Tech, Eric has run a bunch of those. He's got a few guys that bring those over, and they're really cool with IR stack injection on. They're pretty cool. How would the longer runners affect a low revving engine like that 8.1 where it makes peak power 4,500? Well, the longer the runner, the lower the engine speed where the motor will make peak torque at. I've been digging into the lawnmower engine today, and the one lunger on my riding mower needs work. Looking at doing a V-twin swap. There you go. I was actually looking at the intake manifold on my Honda, the CT90, and I so want to make a longer runner on that, so it makes even more torque. The other thing I found out is the carburetor that's on there has a high altitude compensation like pull lever on it. And so it's obviously it's definitely an aftermarket carburetor on this thing. I took it out for my first maiden voyage, got it all registered and stuff, and took it out for my first maiden voyage out into the wilderness, as it were, just basically out into the country, looking for snakes along the side of the road or looking for boards to flip and things like that. So it was a success. It's a little soft on power compared to what I was expecting. But what I want to do is, I know nothing about it. I don't know what the compression is right now. I don't know where the dwell is. I don't know any of that stuff. So I noticed one of the plug wires the plug wire was taped up. So I have some things that I want to do to it to maybe try to improve it. So we want to check the points and check the dwell and all that stuff and see if we can't do a little improvement. But the thing that I was looking at is the intake manifold. And I think a longer intake manifold might be beneficial. A variable RAM would be even better if you made the tube sliding. A couple of people have done that. How about we just make a set of headers for the intake side, put a Holley on the collector. You do that. I don't know how the signal is going to be, but Scott, when trying to pick turbos for a twin turbo system, I'm reading compressor maps. Okay, is it just as easy as cutting the displacement of your motor in half for the calculations? You don't need to do that. You can just double it. I mean, you can do it either way. You don't have to cut your displacement in half. You could just look at the turbo, look at the compressor map on the turbos, and double it for the power that you need. I mean, if you tell us what your combination is and what kind of power you're going to make, you're going to get like 15 or 20 people tell you need to use a GT3076, a GT3582, and a pair of GT45s or S475s or S478s or whatever. You'll get the turbo that you need to use on your combination if you just ask the question here. The altitude compensation was stock on the 90. I didn't think that it was. I thought it depended on year. And I thought that was something that people did on aftermarket carburetors. Yeah, where's the vote at? Oh, it was 50-50, and then I clicked on it. We got 282 votes. Thank you, guys. No is 51%, and yes is 49%, but it looks like it's awfully close. Why does a Kegger intake work so well on a small block Mopar? I don't know what you mean by works so well. Have you seen a comparison between the Kegger intake and, by comparison, a dual plane carbureted intake manifold? The Kegger manifold is a really long runner manifold. So the Kegger manifold is just shaped differently, but it's an awful lot like a tune port manifold is. The Skyrim needs to be on Engine Masters. I agree. I think that those guys would have fun. If it's a real manifold and those guys could get it to test it, I think that would be awesome. Richard, do you believe Holley made a one-off intake for the commercial? You mean for all of the promotion that they're getting on all of the social medias? It would be dumb of them not to do that. Yes, Keglidon everything. I think you spelled Keglidon wrong there, though, Dean. And that would be interesting for them to test. Actually, what I wanted is I need to get that thing. I need to get that thing back. I want to send that to Garrett and have him run it on one of his cars. Engine Masters with a special guest. They got enough qualified guys there to make that happen. If it's not real when the internet's done with them, it will be real. Well, look at our votes right now. We only have 50% believing that it's real. So, well, maybe they're doing 50% of their job there. Was there Earl wants to know if everyone entered the giveaway for the Skyrim. Are they doing an actual giveaway for that? That would tell me that at least if they haven't made a real one, that they're thinking about that. Salad bowl will give the Skyrim a run for its money. The salad bowl has worked fairly well on a lot of applications. Jet Black, you get it if I win it, Richard. Thanks. I will definitely test it and then get it back to you. Jet Black is saying, yes, enter and you will actually get an email back. So that makes it official, right? Tyler's saying he's synced it. Let's see. Hey, I'm building an LS 6-liter. I don't know what the 1000 is. Norris cam, valve springs, ring gap, S475, stock truck intake. How do you bypass the stock fuel regulator? Well, we run on the engine dyno, we run a deadheaded system. So we run all the fuel goes into the regulator and out of the regulator, and the regular bypasses itself. And so we cap the factory fuel rail. And so we just have fuel feeding the fuel rail, and the stock regulator has nothing to do with the system. It's just there, just so that there's not a big fuel leak. And if you're using it in the car, you just run the regulator, and then you have a vacuum line going to it. In this case, it's also going to be a boost line. So it's going to raise the fuel pressure at a 1-to-1 rate. I'm new to the LS world. What's the best computer setup for a 6-liter 4L80 and a 68 C10? You can do that with Rich Nazarati. Okay, cool. You can do that with a stock. If you have the harness and a stock ECU, you can definitely make that work. Matt over at Sloppy has lots of canned tunes that he could put on there and make that work. The Skyrim will pair perfectly with ultra shorty headers. Yes. Then you need the Sky exhaust, the Skyrim exhaust, right? I don't think that the Skyrim is cast. The build I'm looking at is doing a twin remote turbo system on an LS6 CTSV, leaving the motor stock and trying to keep it very, very dailyable. Would like 700 to 800 without too much lag, leaning towards a twin 3076s. That would be fine. Those turbos would work good at that power level. I'm hoping you're going to put ring gap in it, and you're definitely going to have to put bigger injectors in it. I'm hoping also that you're going to put head studs in it. And definitely springs and hopefully a cam. If you're going to try to just do it with a stock motor, you can, because that thing, an LS6, has a decent camshaft in it already. But I'd put springs in it. There are videos of it on the Holley website. It looks real. Well, then that's official. Freiberg. Tell him to keep his eye on the road. He's driving a Jeep. He needs to keep his eyes peeled. The end of the video says, Happy April Fools. It was brought out on April Fools, and it's not something we know already. I mean, at least we all suspect. I'm sure all of you are in agreement that even if they have it, they would have one. It wouldn't be a production piece because I mean, honestly, what is 6 feet or whatever of runner length actually going to do on a motor? I hope that they test it on a 4.8 because then that would be the best motor for it. Skyrim looks 3D printed. It does, really. Overbuilt. Richard, due to the Skyram's available dual top plenum, install 2 moonshot plates for a truly out of this world, that's the moonshot, out of this world 40 stages and utterly cosmic 7,000 horsepower gain. That seems like a lot. And the thing that's going to be really cool, that's going to be a really good match between having a 7,000 shot nitrous setup and the Skyram, is that you're going to have the 7,000 horsepower shot at like 800 RPM, which is nothing but good for any sort of gasoline internal combustion engine. I wonder if large oval port intake on a square port head would cause a beneficial dual reversion pulse. I don't think you'll get a benefit, but I don't think it will hurt you as much as a lot of people seem to think it does. They need to give it to you for lots and lots of testing. I don't think it would take lots of testing to demonstrate what it's going to do. I don't think you'd have to change cams in it. I don't think you'd have to do any of that. I think that you'd have to load into it and then keep drawing the load RPM lower and lower and lower until you find out where the thing actually wants to make peak torque. Six feet of runner length would give awesome tractor ability between idle to where the torque converter hooks up. Yep. So it's going to be mean from idle to converter flash. Are you ever even there? I voted no. It's not real because it's a prop of a deal just too funny. Let's see. Nitrous at 800 RPM. Where are we going? We don't need no rod bearings or rods or pistons. Ooh, shots fired. How to make an LS make torque like a Pontiac, the Holley Skyram. Wow. Pontiac guys be like. So Dan has already done the calculations for us. 7,000 horsepower at 800 RPM is 46,000 foot-pounds of torque. She should be fine, right? That's not even diesel torque or even top fuel torque. That's like electric motor torque. Easy enough to build in a machine shop. Building a thing that's that long and stuff is not. They have the capability of doing that. Even if the top of it was 3D printed, which would be okay because that's all up in the cold area and they don't have to worry about the heat ruining the 3D printing. And the bottom part of it would be not, I don't think, hard. They already have castings for what the bottom of a high ram looks like. So that I don't think that would be hard. Space shuttle torque. Yes, it's actually measured in thrust. Shipping would be expensive. That's right. That somebody brought that. JB brought that up. That shipping the Skyram, which is that, and the name is just just perfect, just totally awesome. Best engine in the Pontiac was the 6.6 liter Trans Am Olds 403. To make the Skyram for rotaries. That's what I wanted. I wanted to make a Skyram for the CT90. I wanted to make the really long runner intake manifold. Yes, Racer D. They can do. They can 3D print out of a variety of different materials, including metal. I don't think you could run it with carbs. It would frost up and fuel would come out of atomization and pool up on top of the intake valve. Well, I disagree with that because I think that the fuel would just fall down the long runner length and find its way in. If you look and see what the fuel does on the 30-inch, I think somebody was saying, I thought it was about 3 feet, on the Sonic Ram deal, on the really long ones on the Chryslers, the fuel found its way to go all the way across there. And it even had to make a 90-degree return because the throttle bodies are mounted up and down like they are normally, and the runners are going across like this. So the fuel has to go into the common plenum and then turn 90 degrees and then go all the way across. They did have some issues, cold weather issues with those manifolds, so that they had to have they had to run hot water through them. They might have even done exhaust through them as well to try to get them for cruise and stuff, I think. So that would be a concern, but there wouldn't be a concern with it going straight down because all the fuel will just fall down and go exactly where it needs to go. What would your recommendation for carbs heads intake on a 572 looking to be all in at under 6,000 to make 700 horsepower broad torque curve, looking for high port velocity street engine? So 700 horsepower, like an airflow research head, a 305 or a 290 or something like that would be fine for that kind of power level. Those things flow more than enough to make that. You could also, since it's a 572, do it with something bigger. You could do it with a 315 or a 335 head. It would be fine. If you want it to happen all under 6,000 RPM, it's not going to be very much camshaft. It's going to be on a 572. I'm thinking like a 236 or a 242 intake duration camshaft. A hydraulic roller would be fine because for that RPM, you can run even at 6,000 RPM on a 572, I would still kind of lean toward, unless you're doing EFI, I would still lean toward a single plane because the dual planes, like a Performer RPM, an air gap manifold is not gonna, it was not designed for a 572. It was designed for a 396. And so I think it's going to limit what you're doing. And so I think a single plane would be fine. You're not going to have any lack of torque on a 572 down low anyways, even if you sacrifice some with a single plane over the dual plane. Is the Edelbrock LT1 RPM air gap intake manifold a good improvement over the stock LT1? I don't know. I've never tested it. And if your stock one's ported, I would be surprised if they didn't make a major change in runner length in the intake manifold. I would be surprised if you saw something. Do you think rotaries have different resonance waves because they're port style? It might begin and end at a different point, but since it travels at the speed of sound, the speed of the wave would be the same. Tim's looking for the pizza. I would think with a carb on the Skyrim, you'd have a problem with the engine came back to idle. I think it would be a problematic manifold. There's no doubt about it. It's really way too long. Direct metal laser sintered Skyrim. Cool. And that's exactly what Michael said. I got an L3 with the BTR Stage 3 Turbo Cam, 823 heads, ported and polished, studded. What's the best intake and what's the best bang for a buck on a twin turbo setup? The factory LS3 intake manifold, as seen in the video that I did on all the LS3, the 2 videos I did on all the LS3 intake manifolds, would be really hard to beat depending on what kind of RPM range you're wanting to run. The Stage 3 Turbo Cam is fairly decent size, but even up to 6,500, you're going to be really hard pressed to beat the factory LS3. I don't know how much power you want to make, but twin GT35s would be good for 1,000 horsepower, and then 45s would be good for 1,400 or 1,500. Since the 632 came out, did the price of the 572 or 502 change and all? I don't know. I would think it would have made those more desirable because people can't afford the 632. I would like to see the electronics that let you do nitrous enrichment with direct injection. You would be just adding the extra fuel through a wet fogger setup is what we did. I didn't do it through direct injection. Richard, remember though that the rotary acts like a 2-stroke, but the rotary still responds to intake runner length though, or at least I thought it did. I think that it does. I think that the runner length still works the same on a rotary. What camshaft would you personally choose for a 5.7, a Silverado for a street performance build? Truck already has a 3200 Circle D. What camshaft I would pick is not necessarily the one you should pick. That's not an accurate question. You need to pick the camshaft. I have all kinds of data up here on the channel for you to pick the kind of power curve that you want. For me, I have a stock camshaft in my truck, so that's not the one that you're going to want right away. You should pick a camshaft that does the things that you want to do. Make a list of all the things that you want. I want it to make this much power. I want it to make this much torque. I want it to daily drive. I want it to get good mileage. I want to, whatever these other things are, whatever all these things are. And then prioritize them. And then you pick a camshaft that does all or most of that stuff. Very few people pick the camshaft based on peak power. I think that would be, unless you're racing, that would almost be nonsensical, because I mean, a peak number doesn't give you everything that the camshaft does. We don't spend most of our time at that peak engine speed, at that peak power level. Very rarely do we do that. In fact, we spend most of our time outside of that. And so the other parts of the camshaft become very important. The fact that you have a 3200 Circle D and a built trans is good, meaning that you could put a decent sized camshaft in it. So I don't know what the rest of the motor is. If it's a stock LS1 intake, I would change that. You could port the heads, and then the camshaft that you pick might be different. But go on and look at all the LS camshafts I have up there and just pick the power curve that you want. There was a rat rod with a do-it-yourself Skyrim. Only use rubber hoses for the runners. You can do that. You got to be careful with the rubber hose. I thought that the rubber hoses were just connectors onto steel, because I've seen a lot of guys with rat rods do it out of steel tubing, not aluminum tubing. And you can use the silicone or the rubber hose you can get from lots of places. That's cheap. You just got to make sure that under vacuum that you're not closing those. And as long as the blades aren't at the top, which they're normally not, that's not usually an issue. The Ford Focus from 2003 has variable runner length. The SVT Focus did, yeah. It had just 2 different runner lengths. Richard, we never started dyno run low in the RPM range, and then the Holley Skyram. It would have to be low, that's for sure. Superflow has a formula for runner length and cross section for RPM power bands. If you redo the adjustable lengths, use the formula to prove if it works. Did you mean use the lengths to prove if the formula works? Is that what you're asking? Lots of BMWs have variable length. BMW has a really slick one. Porsche does that. There's a few that have done variable length. The Ford SHO Taurus had 2 shallow valve angle LS3 heads versus OEM heads on a 6-liter. You need to get to a certain level of power before you need to be concerned with that stuff, because an OEM LS3 head on a 6-liter is still a 650 horsepower head. So if you have an LS2 that's making more power than that, where you need more flow, that would be a lot. Would I feel the difference with a Holley high rise than a 6-liter intake manifold with 3-stroker BTR 3/4 long? I don't know what the BTR is. It a BTR stage 3 then? 3/4 long tube, 3-inch exhaust. I don't want to lose down low. A Holley high ram is not a good choice for the street. That's a race manifold. It's a higher RPM manifold. All of the long runner manifolds, the Fast, the LSXR, the LSXRT, the Trailblazer SS, are going to all make more power than the high ram does, up to 6,000 or 6,500. It would be a better choice for street stuff. Scott, you want recommendations on a camshaft for better low speed torque? Take a look at the test that I did between the Truck Norris cam and the Sloppy Stage 2 cam, and that can give you a fairly good idea. The Truck Norris cam is going to be a lot better down low than an LS6 cam is. Robert, hey, can I shorten or lengthen the intake tube to the filler for a power difference like with a runner length? Oh, to the filter. It doesn't. No, doesn't do the same thing. The inlet tube going into the filter is not going to do anything other than you want to get cold air to it. That would be the important thing. I have the trademark copyrights to the leaning tower ram. Okay. I've learned lots. I'm sure that means lots. From Pontiac, thank you very much. Let's see. What about when I use a Pro Charger? Brian, what was your other question? The intake manifold doesn't care about boost. It does the same thing under boost. So the RPM range that it's effective is the same NA and under boost. With a centrifugal blower, in fact, you're going to extend the long runner is effectively going to be even better, actually, because you're going to extend its effective range up higher because you have a rising boost curve. What's your horsepower and torque guess on a 4.8 Sloppy Stage 2 V1 Vortec 11.2 to 1 and E85? Well, I don't know what pulley you have, whether it's intercooled, what boost you're running, or any of that. But I have Vortec supercharged 4.8 videos up on the channel, so you can kind of take a look and see where those were. Porsche has a couple of different intake strategies, one of which uses the 180-degree nature of a flat 6 to work the airflow between the two sides of the engine. Porsche also did a very simple dual runner. They also have a changing resonance volume that they do, but they also did a very simple dual runner deal where they're basically just pulling one runner up the long section of the runner up out of the way and leaving the short runner, and then breeze through the short runner. It's just a cam action that works, that raises and lowers. It's pretty cool. But this was back pretty far, though. Yes, the Truck Norris is a really good name for a camshaft. The Leaning Tower of Wiesa for anemic cars. That's good. Would a plenum spacer help on a Skyrim? Yeah, it needs more. It needs more height. Have you ran any of the eBay sheet metal intakes? Yes, I have, and I don't like the sniper style ones. We've used a lot of those. A couple of them that I ran early on didn't even have radiused air horns going into them. They're just like cut off. They were Hackosaurus Rex, so that was not good. Also, when they machined the bungs for the O-ring or for the injectors, they were not good. They don't have a nice radius, so that when you try to put the O-rings in, it can cut them. We usually hose them down with WD-40 and do the same thing with the O-rings before we try to put the O-ring in anything, especially those. You can go in and soften the edge up a little bit with emery cloth or even just sandpaper, just clean it out, obviously, after you do that. But a little lube goes a long way. You're friends with VTR. How long before the Truck Norrises are in stock? I'm told that they're already back in stock. Brian said that they were laser etching them so that the name is on them, which is part of the process that they do, but they were in stock. So I'm told that they are. The Skyrim needs a tornado intake. Yeah, because then the tornado will go all the way down those. It would be cool to see that. But if the Skyrim was really cool, all of those tubes would be clear, so you could see the stuff going in. You could see all the like Skyrim-y goodness going in there. My intake tube goes from the throttle plate to the filter, and that's all there is. That's the length I meant. If this is on a V8, like I said, I've done lots of testing with different length inlet tracks in front of the throttle body on an LS. It didn't really show much of a gain. On other applications I have shown, mostly 4-cylinder stuff really showed power changes. The dual plenum V8 showed power changes, but the common plenum V8 didn't show very much of a change. You again, I would just go back to people telling you that you think that you're going to see a difference. I don't think that they've tested it. And also, I think that you should do everything that you can to make sure that you get cold air to that. Truck Norris cam. Truck. It's a truck cam. Clear tubes in different colors. Yeah, and then we would do strobe lights and stuff, and it'd be all discoed out. Yes, clear like the John Kazi tunnel ram video. That's awesome. John Kazi is Kaase. Have you had any luck with the boost builder on Holley EFI? I don't know what that is. Are phenolic spacers worth the effort? They'll change the temperature between the thing that they have on either side of it. They can. But here's the thing. If you have that in a closed engine compartment, everything in the engine compartment is ultimately going to be roughly the same temperature. All of the metal stuff is going to be the same temperature. I don't know that the phenolic spacer is going to, we used to put those on the, everybody had those on the GT40 intake and the factory intakes, all that stuff, because you'll cool the intake off and it'll make more power. That's all well and good. And let's say that you even did that. Let's say that the closed hood engine compartment didn't heat that intake manifold up the rest of the same as everything else. Let's say it was lower in temperature. Let's say that it was 10 or 15 degrees lower in temperature because you phenolic spacered it. The throttle body, like a throttle body would be even a worse example. Let's say you did to the intake manifold, the upper intake manifold on one of these applications. Do some calculations on how fast the air is flowing through the common plenum and the runner through that intake manifold. and then ask yourself, okay, if it's going there in a second or a fraction of a second, which is probably going to be more likely depending on what your engine speed is. If it's taking a fraction of a second for the air to flow through that, how much time does it actually have to pick up temperature from the hot thing? And then how much time does it have to pick up temperature from some sort of temperature differential between the hot thing and the not quite so hot thing? And then also, oh yeah, there's a boundary layer between where 99% of that airflow is flowing and the outer edge of that airflow where it's contacted the manifold. So even if that part heated up, the boundary layer, which would be normal, it's not imparting that into the rest of the flow. So I don't think that that's really happening, is my point. And then on a throttle body, let's say that you, between the intake manifold and throttle body, put a phenolic spacer. Oh, look, the throttle body is a lot cooler. Yeah, it is. Again, except the throttle body is even less amount of a flow space, a distance for the air to travel through there. So like at wide open throttle, the air is going through there again in, fractions of a second. And so how much temperature is it imparting that it's not already imparting from all of the hot stuff that's under the hood already? Six-liter, 80-millimeter BTR Stage 2 turbo cam, 4L80, 4,000 stall, leaving at 3,500 on a 5,000-pound truck. You're already leaving at 3,500, so you're taking away a big part of where I think that the truck Norris would probably be better than that Stage 2 cam. I've never run those two exactly. Personal best of 1098. Do you think the truck Norris cam would improve my time given the power range? Can't you just turn the boost up on that thing? If you're running a 1098, I don't know what the mile an hour is, but you can't be at the limit of that 80-millimeter turbo yet, right? Can you launch at more boost or do something to improve the 60-foot time? Have you any interest in a Mitsubishi Mirage 3A92? It's one of the lightest car engines on the market and seems to be good for boost considering its size. What year Mirage did that come in? Because I had a Mitsubishi Mirage. Is it the Dodge Colt Mitsubishi Mirage turbo motor? The boost builder on a Holley is basically an anti-lag. We have on the NSX that my buddy Jimmy has, he's doing that already. He's doing two-step stuff, and that obviously it stops heat transfer from metal to metal. It works in drag racing, but not at Daytona. I don't know why the principle wouldn't work no matter where you're at. I think it would be incredibly cool to take all the little tips and tricks from the engine masters in your channel and apply them to the giveaway Nova. I don't know what you mean. We've covered way too many things. I don't want to build a really powerful motor. I'm purposely not doing that for the Nova so that way I can just put one in and get it running. The idea is to keep the carb cool. That and a cool can really work on a drag car. The thing that worked in Engine Masters testing was cooling the fuel. If I send you an engine you have not tested yet, will you test it? Just the fact that I haven't tested it yet is not reason enough for me to test it. I have hundreds of motors that I want to test that I don't have the time and money to do right now. Procharger Mopar, what do you mean you're still on? Let's build a Skyram for a 5.9 Mopar. We'll make 300 to 400 like the Kegger, exactly. 7 more chili bombs, flip them vertical and run them into runners. I do want to test the chili bomb. The chili bomb is definitely going to be tested on something, either the LS or the 3800. If the Skyrim isn't real, I don't want to live on this planet anymore. It's pretty extreme. The 392 is a 1200cc 3-cylinder. Just looked it up. Oh, that is kind of cool. I do like that. You know how I like 3 cylinders. So it must be a modern one then. Has VVTi, makes 75 horsepower, 1.2 liters, single cam, 3-cylinder. Reminds me of a D16 with one less cylinder. 1.2 reminds me of the 4-cylinder Suzuki motor, the Suzuki Swift motor, except that was a 4-cylinder. Test an SHO, only big bang with RPM and not boost. I've seen them go 5 digits on the SHO Taurus motors at the show shop with a Vortec on it. I saw them go over 10,000 RPM. I just want to say I love watching people like you because you have so much knowledge. The way you present it, I hope that's good. I just trust it. You've done the math and tested the results. I've run lots and lots of tests. So I'm not an engineer, obviously, but I have run lots of tests, more than most people. And so I have dyno results to fall back on. The 2.2 would be good for the chili bomb, although I'm thinking that chili bomb is going to be like a 500 or 600 horsepower intercooler. So even on the 3800, run at a reasonable amount of boost. I think it would be fine. Tom is building a vertical runner dual plane. No 90-degree turn at the plenum. Well, that'd be interesting. Yeah, it was amazing to hear that thing rev. I was getting a little concerned, but it just kept revving. Yeah, the Suzuki Swift GTI actually is what it was. They ran, some guys ran those in World Challenge back in the day. I've disassembled and reassembled the show motor. Not fun, especially when trying to get the valve clearance right. There was a little bit of work. Can you clarify what a chili bomb is? It's a tubular. It looks like if you've ever, the reason it got its name was from David Freiberger. It looks like a cherry bomb muffler. So it's smaller on the ends where the inlet and outlet for the intercooler are, and then bigger in the center. And then it has an intercooler core stuffed in the middle of that tubing. I have videos up where we've talked about it, and it has an in and out for the water because it's an air to water intercooler. You know, a small air, basically a fitting to clamp a hose on in and out to run water through it, and then you run the boost through it, just like you do the exhaust. You run the boost through it, and it cools the boost off. I haven't run it yet. It's a fairly inexpensive deal, and we just want to see if it even works. The rotary in the Mazda 787B that won Le Mans had variable intakes. Yeah, and it was a 4-rotor also, which is kind of cool. It had sliding trumpets. So obviously it had, because they were trying to improve torque production on the rotary, which is why they made it a 4-rotor, because they could make it bigger. And then sliding trumpets obviously help torque production as well. I want to keep low end on the stroker. What would be a good intake? Throttle body, daily pickup truck, fast. I'm planning on pro charging it at 8 pounds of boost. If you want low speed power, put a mild camshaft in it. Put a Trailblazer SS or the fast. Either one of those is going to work fairly well. The Trailblazer SS probably would be a little bit better way down low. And the camshaft that you pick, like I said, pick a small one, because the rising boost curve is going to enhance power out at the top anyway. And if you pick a smaller cam, you're going to add low speed power where the centrifugal isn't making really any boost. Richard has a warm place in his heart for Geo Metros. Not all Metros. Suzuki or the Chevy Sprint Turbo, which is a Suzuki or a Metro. But the Chevy Sprint Turbo, definitely. And then the Metro XFI. All the other ones, honestly, I could care less about. Those are the two that I like. Not that I don't dislike the other ones. They're good people. But those are the two that I really like. Turbo City had an air cleaner base intercooler. The guys at Vortec also have that. They have I call it the Jupiter 2. It's a saucer section. And then I also tested one. I have a video of a guy who did one locally here. He's the guy now that has the Keglidon also. And I wish I could remember his name, but he did a saucer section also with a air to water intercooler, and it worked pretty good. Somebody had a question about turbo? Oh, do turbos have torque limits like they have horsepower limits? Much less so, because the turbo can support a lot of boost down low, which is where it'll make a lot of torque. So it'll make a bajillion foot-pounds of torque and then run out of airflow to limit horsepower. So that's the problem that's why you have a wastegate, because you want to make 10 pounds all the way out and then 15 and then whatever ultimately the turbo will take, or that the combination will take, or that the turbo will support. But if you just like ran the gate ran the reference line to the top of the gate and just basically effectively closed the gate, what would happen is it would make all the boost, and it can make a lot of boost down low and in the middle. And then ultimately it would run out of boost at the end. But it's not going to run out in the middle where it's going to have like a really huge torque number and probably break something. Richard, how fast have you been and what car and where? We've talked about this a bunch of times. The fastest I've been is 227, and that was in a Honda Civic, and that was at Bonneville, where we set records with which is still, I think, to this day, the world's fastest Honda Civic. Who was the giant Japanese guy that ran the twin engine Suzuki at Pike? It was a huge name too. I can't remember the guy's name. He was awesome. He was all throttle. The Mirage of the modern day is the Metro of before, not in any way besides small economical front wheel drive, but it fills the same spot. I haven't even looked at, I don't really read Road and Track and Car and Driver and those magazines anymore like I used to, kind of religiously way back. But like I said, I bought a Mirage Turbo, which I liked, and I liked the twin stick Colts and all those things from back in the day, back when, you know, they were fairly lightweight hot hatches, which was kind of cool. Monster Chijima, that's what it is. Good call, Andy. Pontiac Fireflies, those were the Fireflies were in Canada. Those were the Canadian versions, right? 87 to 89 Dodge Daytona Shelby Z 2.2 Turbo 2 engine. Can I get your thoughts on this? You have to ask a specific question. You can't just ask a general like essay question. But I'm obviously a fan of the 2.2s. I have a couple of them. I have an Omni, so I'm a big fan, and I'm doing lots and lots of testing on those coming up. Why did the 3800 make extra power boosted if it wasn't the plenum? Why would you attribute it to the plenum? .351 Windsor flat tops with NKB heads. Are those Nick White or something? 579, 286, 300 is an advertised number. 114 dual plane torque storm with intercooler topped off with a Phytech. That sounds like a good combination. Three-cylinder turbo cars from Canada. Recaro seats, body ground effects, hatch spoiler was all pretty cool. 900 horsepower for a street strip application, big block or Chevy LS. That's pretty easy to do with both of those. You'll have less weight, obviously, doing it with an LS. I ran 130 miles an hour in an 88 Supra NA. Took forever to get the last 20 miles an hour. That's an interesting thing. I went through that with my Mustang. I have a 5-liter Mustang, as you guys know, an 88. I'm the original owner, and I ran it out the Silver State. In fact, the reason I bought it was to go SECA showroom stock racing, and I ran it out the Silver State. And the great thing about that is it would run like flat out. So I just, you know, add the thing to the wood and going as fast as I could, and it would go, especially when it was basically all stock. All I had were think I put headers on it and open pipes that angled out to the side like the old Shelby GT350s had. Otherwise, it was stock. I think it had a K&N filter in it. And I ran it out the Silver State, and it would go 147 miles an hour. And to go the same speed in fourth gear as it would in fifth gear. Fifth gear would just be a much lower engine speed. But the cool thing is, while you were running in fifth gear, because otherwise it would heat up, you know, you would go up hills, and then you'd have to downshift and keep going, because the road is not just perfectly flat and with turns and stuff. It has rolling hills and all kinds of stuff. But the cool thing is, when you go on the downhill side, you'd just be watching the tack basically. Come on, I need another 200 RPM. Give me another 200 RPM, because you're wanting that extra mile an hour basically. Are you going to turbo the 3800 with the NA intakes? No, I'm not going to. It's not, the buildup isn't to show you what the most effective intake manifold is for a turbo application. It is one of those NA intake manifolds. That would make much more average power production. And then as we showed, if you take the rudder length away, it makes more peak power and less at the bottom. But I'm going to use the blower manifold. What motivates you in your plans for the future? I'm an enthusiast, so I like testing all kinds of stuff. So I look forward to getting on the dyno again and again and again. But this month in April, I'm going to get the Nova done. They say when the throttle is open 50%, the entire plenum is full at max capacity. I don't know what you mean by full. The plenum is full of air, you mean? It's fully charged, there's no vacuum in it? You'd be able to measure that. Then when you go to 51 to 100%, the velocity of said air is controlled with the blade. You're judging the plenum filling by throttle position, by TPS? I don't think that I would do it that way. Can I put a Truck Norris cam in an LS2 GTO 6-liter? Yes, you can. Is your 3800 plenum mod influenced by the small block Chevy Rochester injection? I don't know what you mean. The Rochester injection isn't at all like what I'm doing to the 3800. Who unsubbed? If you didn't really care so much about horsepower and trying to get 1,000 foot-pounds of torque, how do you choose the correct turbo? You would do it the same way. You're going to need, if you decide what RPM that's going to happen at, you can determine how much airflow that is based on your NA power output, and you could determine how much boost that is and how much airflow it is, and you could pick the turbo accordingly. The turbo will do that even if you're not trying to get 1,000 horsepower. With a 1,000 horsepower turbo, you could still get 1,000 foot-pounds of torque. It's just you choosing the right turbo size now is going to be a function of response if you don't care about the top end. Rich, Harold lives down in Southern California. It means that speed density doesn't give good signal after 50% throttle. Then you have to go to alpha N. I don't understand why. Why does speed density not give a good signal after 50% throttle? 50% throttle doesn't give you 100 kPa on the dyno. So it's still giving you, speed density still gives you a perfectly accurate map signal at other throttle angles. So I don't understand that statement. Would you consider doing a video one day where you show how to tune EFI? I recently bought HP tuners and have zero EFI tuning. I don't do HP tuners or any of the factory things. The only one that I ever work on is, well, there are three: Fast, Holley primarily, and then the MS3 Pro. Because the plenum is almost at atmospheric. It's not at 50% throttle. That's what I'm telling you. I don't know if you've maybe haven't spent a lot of time doing that, but on the dyno, if we go to 50%, because somebody was asking me about this. Somebody was asking me saying, oh, so-and-so told me that you'll make more torque at 50% throttle than you will at 100% throttle. You should test that. And I did, and it doesn't. And where the little kPa bubble is on the Holley, it's the easiest way to explain it. At 50% throttle, it's not at 100 kPa. And for what you're saying to be true, it would have to be at 100 kPa at 50% TPS signal, but it's not. And it would depend on the motor that you're doing and all of that too. If you have a giant size throttle body on a really small motor and 50% throttle is 100%, but then it's still not going to change anything. If it's at 100 kPa and you open the throttle more, nothing else is going to happen. You're not worried about the airspeed going through the throttle body for charge filling, because that's not what's doing it. The charge filling is coming from the runner length. What do you feel about Mega Squirt over a stock ECM? I don't know about a stock ECM because I never run them on the engine dyno. I just don't know. I don't utilize everything that those ECUs have to offer, because all I do is air fuel and timing and variable cam sometimes now with some of these motors. That's not using anything that these things have the ability to do. One more minute. Man, I've already gone way too late. Well, let's close out our poll and see where we are. Is the Skyram a real intake manifold? 54% said no, and 46% said yes. So we'll have to find out whether or not, and I'll let you guys know because I talked to the man. And we'll end the poll right now. So for you guys waiting around, the Skyram is real. It is an intake manifold that does exist, and it will be tested. It will be tested by the guys at Engine Master, so it would be awesome. I also would like to test it. In fact, I was just talking to Freiberger about that, and so that might be something that could happen too. I'll have to talk to the powers that be at Holley and see if that's something that we 594 votes. So people must be jumping off and then jumping back on and then voting again and jumping off and jumping on and voting again, which is awesome. I appreciate that. But it is indeed a real intake manifold. It does exist, and fingers crossed it will be tested, which is, super cool. When they're going to do that, I want to make sure that I'm down there to at least get to watch, because that would be kind of cool. Skylab crashed already. Runners. The runners are longer than 36 inches, I think. I said yes because I want to believe. That's awesome. Thank you guys all for showing up. I've got videos. I'm trying to figure out what the next video is going to be. I haven't actually figured that out yet. So I will work on that, and we'll put some up tomorrow, and I will see you guys tomorrow on the live feed. Have a good weekend. Well, at least it's Saturday night.